Well, it's a new day for those who live at Mountrail Bethel Home. Lindsay Miller took a drive to get an inside look. Lindsay?
That's right, Joe. The 30-plus residents recently moved into the new state-of-the-art skilled nursing facility. I took a drive to Stanley to get an inside look. Moving to a new home can bring excitement and reflection. Just ask Mountrail Bethel Home resident Curtis Esfold.
Memories in the old one because my grandpa from Stanley here was over there.
Esfold and his mother both call the place home. He says while his new room is spacious, it reminds him of family who lived in the old building.
This is the north wing item.
The original Mountrail Bethel home was built in the 1960s.
Old nursing home, the bathrooms were too small.
Steph Everett is the administrator for Bethel Home. She says they drew up plans for the addition in 2020 and broke ground just 2 years ago.
2 new ones over here.
It provides more space for residents with improvements to rooms, as well as the salon and activities areas.
CNAs now have stations in all the neighborhoods. Before, in the old nurses station, the nurses were back there and all the CNAs were back there.
Everett says having designated areas for the CNAs to work in their hall has helped staff with charting and paperwork.
Purchasing, break room.
This new home has 34 residents and officially opened last week. The project cost roughly $31 million, and they received a $25 million donation from Mountrail County, and Everett has been fundraising for the rest. The new home is part of a nearly decade-long multi-phase project for Mountrail County Health Center. It includes updates to the hospital and the addition for MRI infusion and pharmacy services. Back to you, Joe.
All right, thank you so much for that, Lindsay.